Everyone, what a beautiful sight this is to look at all these different iPhones in front of us. And I'm definitely going to tell you, it's really interesting when you start to see the similarities between a lot of these different devices. So, in front of us, we have every single Max iPhone Apple has ever made. This includes all the way to the XS Max from 2018, the 11 Pro Max from 2019, the 12 Pro Max from 2020, the 13 Pro Max from 2021, and now the 14 Pro Max from 2022. Now, I will say all these different iPhones have a lot of capability, and all these iPhones brought a lot of things to the table. But I will say this year's release has been very, very interesting. So, stemming back from the XS Max and kind of looking at the 14 Pro Max, we can see how each individual iPhone kind of changed things up. Now, with the XS Max, we had a 6.5-inch display, the 11 Pro Max 6.5-inch display. 12 Pro Max, we started to see a 6.7-inch difference, and this is where the 14 Pro Max also has that same type of display. Now, when you look at something like the 14 Pro Max, I think this type of device still looks very, very good for the most part. I mean, this phone is going to look good for years and years now. It just came out. But when we look at something like the iPhone XS Max from 2018, it is very interesting to me to see the similarities. These two iPhones, believe it or not, are years and years and years of difference from one another. But you probably wouldn't be able to, like personally, I wouldn't be able to tell. If I didn't really know these iPhones like this, I would assume they're probably like a few years apart, but not like 4 or 5 years apart. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max, we can see the biggest difference here is with that notch. And this is the one thing that's probably going to be carrying the iPhone lineup for a long period of time. One thing Apple does is, if you kind of think about it, they want people to go and upgrade to the latest and greatest iPhones. They kind of, will delay features here and there. But with the notches, it's very hard for Apple to go ahead and keep kind of re-engineering their phones to make people want to upgrade. When you look at the iPhone XS Max back in 2018, the main reason people wanted to buy this iPhone was that it was a bigger iPhone. It was better styling. It was probably had better battery life than before, which really wasn't true. But they wanted a bigger phone, so that in and of itself was a big reason to upgrade. But now the main reason to upgrade is with the dynamic island display. And I think that's really cool. When you look at these two phones, there's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of similarities too, which is very interesting. And now comes in 2019, probably one of my favorite iPhones of all time. Like, I think the 11 Pro Max still holds up very, very well in 2022. Now, with the 11 Pro Max, we were still maintaining that 6.5-inch display. So it was still a OLED display, Super Retina OLED display, still had, very good high resolution. But this is where Apple started kind of switching things up, because now, from it being just a bigger older brother, they actually put a much bigger size battery on the 11 Pro Max. It is a massive size battery here. It was almost 4,000 milliamp hours. The 14 Pro Max does have a bigger size battery, but that was a big thing that Apple did here. Now, beyond the notch, another big thing that still carries over to all the newer iPhones, at least the Pro ones, is the back styling. The 11 Pro Max brought this frosted glass back inside of it, which was really awesome. And when I feel both these phones in the hand, bro, these phones still feel very premium, these 2019 model phones. Now, if you look at the camera modules as well, as you can see, triple camera setups on both. In 2019, this was the first time Apple brought over the triple camera setup, at least for the Pro models. They may have had it for maybe some other product, I don't remember. But this is the first time they brought it on an iPhone, and this was amazing. For them to go ahead and bring out this triple camera setup, even though it looks much smaller than the current iPhones, it's crazy. The telephoto, ultra-wide and wide-angle lenses are awesome, but I don't know if I'm more happy about that or the frosted glass back, because now Apple went ahead and they kept it on all the other iPhones, and it still feels so premium. I'm such a humongous fan of that, and that is something that stands out to me probably more than anything else. Now comes the iPhone 12 Pro Max from 2020. It's very interesting. Apple went back-to-back years with really big upgrades. Now, I don't think the 12 Pro Max was like a crazy big phone that you should have probably picked up anyway, but this was the first time. Now, excuse the back, I totally forget my back is cracked here. We still maintain that frosted glass back, but this is where Apple ended up bringing out that actual flat side on these iPhones. So this was another massive difference here. No longer do we have, these flat sides or curved sides. We have these flat sides now, which look amazing. But on the front, this was probably one of the bigger differences as well. With the 12 Pro Max, Apple ended up bringing that 5 points. Apple ended up bringing that 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED panel, which was an amazing screen. Out of everything I could complain about with the 12 Pro Max, I really couldn't complain about that display. I mean, that display looked very nice. And ever since then, Apple's been pretty much using the same exact display. Now, of course, with the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it's a better display overall, especially with that, dynamic island. But that is something cool that kind of stood out to me, and I think it still stands to this day that this phone, as much as I can complain about the battery and all that stuff, you can't really complain too much about the build quality or the way this phone actually has probably one of the better panels of that year. But then comes probably the most important. I feel like I've said this with every single iPhone. The 13 Pro Max is probably the most important iPhone Apple has made, and I do think the 13 Pro Max is a better phone overall than the 14 Pro Max. It brought more to the table, and it all stems. First of all, the build quality on these phones are so much the same. If we take a look at the back, you probably couldn't tell which one is which. At least with like the 11 Pro Max, you can kind of tell. With the 12 Pro Max, you might be able to tell a little bit with the camera module sizes, but these two phones look almost identical. They both look almost like 14 Pro Maxes, with the LiDAR sensors on both, frosted glass backs, MagSafe capability, the whole 9 yards. Both these phones have it. But with the 13 Pro Max, what this phone ended up bringing, which was insane, was actually the Pro Motion display. And in my opinion, this is the groundbreaking achievement that the 13 Pro Max has. When you go from the 10s Max to 11 Pro Max, 12 Pro Max, we were waiting for 120 Hz or even 90 Hz, and Apple ended up bringing it with this specific phone. Since then, it's been stemmed over to the iPhone 14 Pro Max as well, and I am really, really happy about that. For something like the 14 Pro Max to still have ProMotion is awesome, but it stemmed from the 13 Pro Max, and this phone in and of itself was awesome to have that type of capability built in. So from that, going from the 10s Max, 11 Pro Max, 12 Pro Max, then to the 13 Pro Max, this was the top of the top. This was the epitome of one of my favorite iPhones of all time. And now that it's available in the used market, I mean, this thing is great too, but let alone just the build quality differences. Like I said before, you were getting speed improvements, you were getting battery improvements, you were getting camera improvements. The Pro models, in my opinion, have been some of the best iPhones probably ever released, with the Pro specifically, but the Pro Maxes for them starting to kind of take shape and now becoming better and better is a really good sign. Now, it's not perfect. There's been obviously things I didn't like about each iPhone. The 10s Max, I didn't like the battery life. The 11 Pro Max, I don't really know what I didn't like. Maybe I don't even know. The 12 Pro Max, I didn't like the battery life either. There were some battery health issues as well. The 13 Pro Max, honestly, I can't even name anything. Maybe the notch is a little bit outdated now. With the 14 Pro Max, I don't know if I can say this phone is perfect. There's been a lot of camera issues that a lot of people have been having with certain applications, but again, Apple's going to probably fix it. It's too soon to tell what's going to happen. But when I look at each individual iPhone here and we kind of bring them all together, I think with something like the 10s Max, obviously this phone, I probably would recommend going up to something like the 11 Pro Max, but Apple does something very interesting here. Almost every single other phone I like more than the previous phone. So with the 10s Max, not a humongous fan of it, still works well, but the 11 Pro Max, I'm a huge fan. The 12 Pro Max, I mean, it's a good phone that brought a lot to the table, but the 13 Pro Max is way better. So this makes me happy about what's going to be with the 15 Pro Max. I feel like the 14 Pro Max is just kind of like a entry point that even if the 15 Pro Max ends up looking the same as the 14 Pro Max, I think there's going to be something there like the reverse wireless charging or something like that, where it's going to be like a really big upgrade, just like how these two phones were in my opinion. So in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you own any of these Pro Max iPhones, I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video.